Thank you so much, Frank, for giving me the opportunity to host this digital dialogue. I joined the Institute as a fellow earlier this year, and to just give you a little bit of my background, I'm Nita Sanger. I'm a strategy, operations, and digital transformation executive, and I focus on helping advisory services, and I provide advisory services to services businesses to help them transform themselves. We chose this topic of generative AI and legal because a number of us were just very recently at Legal Week, which was held at the end of January in New York. And it was one of the biggest gatherings for the legal industry, which had law firms, corporate legal departments, technology, and investors. And the idea was that we were there was a lot of discussion about the key trends. And one of the things that we saw when we were there was that generative AI is going to have a big impact. Everybody was talking about generative AI and what the impact was going to be on law firms and corporate legal departments. But everybody was kind of struggling to figure out what this was going to mean for their business. So to just give a little bit of context, we know what generative AI does. It's designed to generate new content, data, or outputs that mimic or resemble human-created content. Whereas the previous AI solutions we've seen focused on automating manual repetitive tasks, and that means a lot of the work done by junior professionals was automated. Generative AI will automate some of the work of the higher level knowledge workers, which would then directly impact legal professionals. And I'm sure some of you must have heard of different studies where McKinsey has sort of said that between 25 to 30% of the work done by the legal professionals will be automated by 2030. Goldman Sachs released a report which says generative AI could automate about 44% of the legal tasks in the industry. And Deloitte said that generative AI won't be replacing people, but will instead focus on arming employees with tools that help them advance their productivity. So overall, Gen AI is going to have a significant impact on the legal industry. And it's going to be not just how the professionals do the work that they do, but it's also going to be what does that mean? How do you charge your customers? Because, especially when you have a time and materials model, and how would you impact your firm profitability? And then the skills are also going to need to be different. So with that, I wanted to bring on my panel, who are all experts in the space, so that we can actually hear from them. And I will ask them questions. And as Frank mentioned, feel free to put in questions as you hear them talking. All right, so here are all my esteemed panelists. So what I wanted to do was just to sort of give you a brief introduction in each one of them. So I will start out with 𝗏𝗏. 𝗏𝗏 is the VP Product Management for Thomson Reuters. She leads the document intelligence and intelligent drafting product teams. Additionally, 𝗏𝗏 is leading the case text co-counsel integration into Thomson Reuters. And she develops customer-driven legal software that help attorneys get their jobs done. She also has formerly worked at, she did global product strategy for Practical Law. And before Thomson Reuters, worked at Simpson Thacher, both in New York and DC. Then let us bring you to Brent, who is you can call him the technology whisperer. And he's a tattooed legal maverick, has zigzagged through the tech meccas from Silicon Valley to New York City to Tampa. And he sprinkles his legal magic on startups and tech giants, all with his good looks, as you can tell, and his radiant smile. So he's a lawyer who actually gets tech. He's the kind of guy who would debug code and navigate a legal maze before breakfast, armed with a degree from MIT and a flair for turning legal gibberish into startup success stories. He's co-founded many startups, teaches creativity and innovation, and pens books on AI law and IP. And so this makes him the legal world's equivalent of a rock star.
You have to disclose that ChatGPT wrote that.
Okay, well, ChatGPT wrote that. Then I bring you to our next participant, Toby Brown, who was maybe the last person I'm introducing, but certainly not the least. He, in the industry, is known as the godfather of pricing. He's currently the CEO of DV8 Legal Strategies and NextGen LPM. He works with law firms and legal departments to develop effective strategies and executes on them. Toby's previously worked as a chief practice officer at multiple AMLO 50 firms overseeing a number of their departments and focusing on increasing profitable revenue. Today, Toby is a global expert on law firm profitability. He's founded the Legal Value Network and president for the board of Sally Standards. So what I wanted to do is and what I'll do is ask questions and then I'll address them to each of you. So it would be great if you could answer them. So first, Toby, since you're the pricing expert, what do you think is going to be the impact on the use of Gen AI on law firm profitability, and how should they address it?
Thank you, and I'm glad to be here today with all of you. That is obviously a hot topic, and I'm currently working on a paper. I have a couple of degrees in economics, working to apply the science of economics to what we think might happen, given the quick and very high interest in generative AI. A lot of people are going, "Oh, we'll just value build," and I don't see that happening, at least not right away, because that's not how clients buy legal services. So, and you sort of teed it up, Nita. The fundamental economics question that I see is what happens in an industry that bills by time and material, which is what legal does, when there is a significant increase in productivity. Now, other industries have experienced this, agriculture, manufacturing, and in those circumstances, the providers, which in our world would be law firms, realized the new value created by those innovations because they were able to make investments in. And one of the challenges in our industry is the term productivity typically means how many hours did you build. In any other industry, it's how many inputs does it take to produce an output. And so when we say productivity is going to be increased significantly, what that means is it's going to take fewer hours of lawyer work to produce the same output, be it a document, be it a hearing, whatever it is. We did a webinar a while back with the Legal Value Network, and we were able to get quite a bit, I think it was $500 million of anonymized billing data to test these things. And Nita, you had mentioned the Goldman stat, and we wanted to see if that was accurate. And with that data, we were able to determine that 40% of time entries contain the words either draft or review. And we think that's an area that will have a high impact. It's not the only area, and it won't be 100% of that area. So what we did is take that, and as you mentioned, I may have some interest in law firm profitability. I put it through a couple of my law firm profitability models and said, what if 5% of partner time was impacted and 20% of associate time was impacted by generative AI? And what happened in that scenario, the first one's obvious, the revenue is going to go down. And the revenue went down 13%. But what's less obvious and a bigger problem, in my opinion, is the profit margins go down about 7%. Mm-hmm. What that means is even if the law firm generates more work like that, there's going to be less money to pay partners. And core to this in the profitability space that many lawyers do not appreciate, and this is I'll quote Karl Marx, or I'll bastardize it, Karl Marx, workers work and owners benefit. And that's something lawyers, especially law firm partners, struggle with because they'll say, well, my rate's the highest. So if I bill time, that generates the most money. Well, it does generate more revenue, but it doesn't generate profit, as much profit. Profit comes from non-partner efforts. Mm-hmm. So to sum up, I see that this is going to have a measurable impact on law firm profitability because it is going to impact leverage. And leverage is how much work is done by non-partners.
Got it.
I'll stop there and somebody else can.
Nita, can I comment?
Sure.
Thanks. Great remarks, Toby. Just as an example, or perhaps a slight counterexample, I've been doing fixed fee billing now for 2 or 3 years, seeing the sort of writing on the wall, and actually just from a personal point of view, trying to get away from the recording of my entire life in 6-minute increments. And in my transactional practice, which services mostly technology startups, I have found that my clients are very eager and willing to accept fixed fee billing. The trick, of course, is to pick the fee, and identify, what the intrinsic value of the work product is likely to be in the context of how the client's going to use it. A form of NDA is going to have a pretty stable value to any company, whereas, the purchase and sale agreement for a company getting acquired is going to range from, a $1 million deal to a $100 million deal. And so that work is going to have an intrinsic value that will accordion up and down based on the underlying value of the deal. But end of day, I've found that very few clients bridle at the concept of fixed fee billing based on some suggestion of the value of the work product. I had one institutional client had a little trouble getting it through their bureaucracy, and of course we don't do it at all for litigation for obvious reasons, not the least of which is if you ever move to get your fees, you need to convince the judge that you bill by the hour, not on a fixed fee basis. So we still have that problem to solve. But just as a data point, we're realizing pretty good success with our model.
And value-based pricing, I think, is the way to go, because the real value that you're providing, because even if there's parts of the work that you're doing are getting automated, the real value is going to be what the lawyer is going to be able to sort of, the insights that they provide, etc., the legal advice, which is still going to be very much needed. So it's actually the mundane stuff, and some of which they can actually do faster. But if you do value-based pricing, which I think is what you're saying, Brent, I think that's going to continue. There's
the old story of they hired the engineer to fix the machine, and he looked at it for 5 minutes and hit it in one spot, and it was fixed. And they sent him a bill for $30,000, and they said, "What the heck was that for?" And they said, "Well, it's $5 for the hammer, and it was $25,000 for knowing where to hit it." And we lawyers with significant experience, I've been practicing 30 years. It's easy to equate the value of what I do to the time it takes me to do it. But the joke is that as I get better and better at it, the time is less. And so that doesn't make the work product less valuable. So it's, and I think it's perfectly reasonable. And I guess, Toby, I'm concerned that you think that clients won't go for it. And I'm wondering what we do to solve that, because we can't just go out of business because we're good at everything all of a sudden.
So Toby,
can we?
A very, very astute point there. And obviously, I'll say this to make it explicit. Brent is an outlier. He took this. He took initiative around this. Most lawyers at big firms this is very foreign to them. And the key here, and in my article, I'm contemplating like second and third order impacts. The first order impact is going to be competition for legal services is going to go up, because it will take fewer lawyers to produce the same outputs that are being produced now. But to your point, and something you alluded to in your comments, which you can actually do for litigation, it's this little word called scope. So I've had this conversation with many clients. In my role, I do a lot of client interaction, and I had this with a good friend of mine, and it's a large tech company. They require budgets. You can't get paid unless you give them a budget. And I said, "So you're getting scope with the budget?" And he gave me the blank look. "What, scope?" And I said, "Well, what's a budget? What is a budget without scope? It's just a wild guess, and there's no scope changes." So I'll call it a third order impact. Lawyers are going to have to get, I'll call it legal project management skills so that they can scope. Now I'll say this, lawyers and clients actually scope after the fact. They look at a bill and go, "Oh, this was too much. You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have done that." So whenever lawyers tell me, "Oh, we don't have time to scope," I'm like, actually you do. If you do it on the front end, you'll do it better and you'll do it in less time. So that's what you're doing, Brent. Because and I'll just really quickly, in litigation, you can scope 90 days pretty easy. And
I would say this because I'm a consultant. I think consulting has already started to think, we've been doing that for a while. Whenever a project comes in, you say, okay, this is what is expected. This is how much time and effort we think it's going to take. And you sort of say, here's how many hours it's going to take us to do that. But the idea is, it's usually we get to the point and saying, this is how much we expect it to be, keeping in mind, Toby, a little bit of what you said, how much time we think it's going to take, but the real value that we're going to be bringing. So it's already happening. So Brian, given your sort of unique sort of background, that you're like a lawyer and MIT scholar and already thinking of different ways, what skills do you think lawyers are going to need? What would they need to develop? How would it change how they work?
Well, you hit the nail on the head. We need to be taught a few things that we're not taught in law school. They don't teach you much about the practice or the business of law in law school, and that's one of the things you learn when you hit the ground or you start your own law firm, like I did years ago. Is wow, we got to learn how to bill. We got to learn about client relations and all the things that that's why it's an apprenticeship. Really, it's why the being a lawyer is a 6 or 8 or 10 year apprenticeship. But yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Not only do we need to learn how to practice law and be good at that, but project management skills 100% have got to be part of the profession now, because we are going to switch. We are going to switch our model. The tools that the AI is enabling are going to make us just better, stronger, faster at doing our job. There's no doubt about it.
So 𝗏𝗏𝗴𝗹, I just wanted to get your thoughts, because as you've been hearing some of the conversation going about, given the role that you come from, like Thomson Reuters, which has got a lot of products and solutions, how are you incorporating Gen AI? And would love to get because you are now meeting the needs of lawyers in a slightly different way. So would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, and thanks for having me on. Just an observation on sort of what we're talking about in that first question. I think that in many ways, the legal profession is going to be pushed to modernize the way that the rest of the economy has kind of modernized, right? And I think about, time to value. So for example, Westlaw is a famous, Thomson Reuters product. Our goal in that product is to reduce the amount of time an attorney spends in there looking for a product. And that doesn't reduce the value. The more efficient, the more effective we become at helping attorneys find what they're looking for, the more we can charge for the product. So it's sort of a reverse metric that we're looking at, particularly in software and SaaS, is that like you want to reduce the user's time in the product to prove that you're creating value for them. So just on that, but we sort of, as generative AI, became a household term, kind of revamped all of our product roadmaps to think about how we can use generative AI in those products. And not just because we think we should slap Gen AI, on a product, but we think that this technology allows us to solve previously unsolved problems. So it can make things better and faster, things that we could already do, but now it's sort of unlocking all new, levels of capability in products. So we're bringing it to legal research. I can't remember if 𝗕𝗿𝗶, if you were the one who mentioned this, but like draft and review being 2 of the biggest things that attorneys spend time on. Our research shows the same thing. And we're focusing on improving reviewing and launching new solutions around generative AI drafting, because the new capability that Gen AI brings to the table is right? Like a lot of AI can read things. It has structured data before, you can organize data, but the net new gain here is the ability to write, to create. And so we're really using harnessing the power of that in our solutions to expose new ways of doing things.
So then I want to have a follow-on question from you. So this is great, but like we've known that lawyers are kind of hesitant to sort of adopt new technology. They kind of like, this is how we do it. So how are you kind of, and this is towards you, 𝗏𝗏𝗴𝗹, because given the role that Thomson Reuters is so well respected in the industry, and you're almost like, people are like, and law firms, like I said, all know they need to do something, but they're almost looking towards, a firm like yours to be an advisor and say, okay, so what do we go about doing? So how are you guys approaching that?
Yeah.
How are you telling them what should they be doing?
And our approach is much more than just adding solutions, to market. What we encourage firms to do, and we're doing a lot of workshops, a lot of like just general education on generative AI with firms and legal departments to just help them understand the ins and outs, kind of divorced from any of our product offerings. It's not a sales call, right? It's sort of, here's how you should be thinking about using generative AI. Here are the pitfalls. Here are the areas to sort of experiment in. One of the things that TR or Thomson Reuters did internally is that we have set up learning days for our employees to get up to speed on generative AI and how it might impact their profession. So like our marketing teams or sales teams, product teams, finance, we want everyone to get their hands dirty and figure out how to use generative AI. And we recommend the same to our clients and partners, to set up these learning days that are sort of safe spaces to work with generative AI. We also sort of help firms evaluate different models or frameworks or environments that they should be working in as well.
Got it. So 𝗕𝗿𝗶, given your sort of, because you obviously done so much on law firm profitability, how would you suggest that a law firm start thinking about this? How should they approach? Because a lot of like what we just said, and we saw that when we were in New York, that they all know they need to do something, but they're not quite sure how to start doing that. So what would you tell them? How should they approach it?
Well, this actually picks up on what Rawia was saying. This is the crux actually of the article I'm putting together. And it's that, and this is, once you hear this, you're going to go, well, duh. Law firms, like any business, a core criteria for deciding is profit. So instead of saying which Gen AI, they should be saying where, because it predicted from, I keep saying the article paper, is, I call it a second order impact, is that once you say here is where we're going to do this, and again, being agnostic to the actual AI, all of a sudden in that space, the firms are going to start to develop competitive advantage. And what I mean by that, I'll pick on Brent. If Brent starts making a ton of AI investments in transactional, we'll just say mid-market M&A, just to randomly pick one. And it's, I don't see firms or lawyers like Brent saying, oh, we're going to use it to draft document X and we're done now. No, what I see is iterations to where they will do it at this point, and then at the next point, and then at the next point. So pretty soon, Brent will have competitive advantage against other lawyers because he will be better, faster, and cheaper doing what he does. Something that's not brought up frequently when Gen AI is discussed is not just that it's more efficient, but that it's better. If you look at the Boston Consulting Group, there was a recent Canadian run at Doc Review and eDiscovery. They're basically saying it's not just speed, it's quality. So that competitive advantage will include, oh, we're not only faster, we're better, and we'll produce insights to prove that. We'll come back and say, this is a clause in the contract that has this kind of importance because we can see it across this. In this litigation, we can analyze the following and tell you, oh, these are the factors this judge prefers in a motion for summary judgment. Gotcha. So but what I am seeing, and my friends are seeing in that space, is firms are haphazardly choosing where to do this. And from experience at a law firm, what I could easily see happen is, because I've seen this happen, the labor people go, hey, this would be really good for us because we have a more repetitive practice. And so let us lead the charge on generative AI deployments. So you're I'll say a full service firm. And then all of a sudden you're developing competitive advantage in the labor practice. That's not where your profit comes from. I can just tell you straight up. So back to your question and building on the other comments, profit should be a huge criteria used in deciding where to deploy this.
Got it. So Brent, what are your thoughts on this?
I may, yeah. So we're actually we're developing a couple things in-house, if you will. I'm a minority co-founder of a couple different startups, one of which is called Zenzio, and we're producing a sort of a customer interface that sits on the law firm website. I mean, we're using it in other verticals as well, but to greet the customer, the potential client, to talk about the kind of services that we offer, to generally ask them some identifying questions, get a sense of what it is the customer needs, and help walk them through potentially a plan for providing legal services. The other one we're working on is we're finding places in the practice where we are spending a lot of money on outside service providers, like certain searching capability, for example, or certain research capability, where we go out to an outside service provider who knows certain things. I don't want to name names, but and so we're redeveloping some of that research capability in-house using our own homegrown AI, so that we don't need to spend, say, $1,000 on a particular vendor. We can do the work in 5 seconds and charge the client substantially less.
Got it. So what I would just want to add to what both of you said, and this kind of tags a little bit, Toby, to what you said too. I think and this is where, because I'm doing digital transformation, one of the things you have to say is sort of do a systematic approach of how you go about sort of saying, what should you do and where should you do it? So I call it a 5E approach. This is sort of an approach that I've used consistently. First is we're talking about what's happening in the outside world, what's going on. So this is what we're discussing now. The next thing is almost look at your own business, evaluate it. When you evaluate it, you sort of say, okay, like you said, where's your profit coming from now? What would benefit the most by doing this? And that's what you've been saying, Toby, too. Don't just go do it in, the employment side if that's not where your profitability is going to be coming from. Look where it's coming from. And then you say, okay, what would we like this to look like? It's almost like creating a vision of what the future of your business should look like. What are all the different impacts? This is going to be people impact. It's going to be, and then actually go about executing on it. And once you do that, set KPIs to make sure you're doing that. So I call that establish. And the last thing is, this is not a one and done. You're going to continuously have to do this. But what I wanted to do is, before we move to our next question, there were some questions that came in. So, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
𝗟𝗏𝗴𝗹 might have had a comment to add to that.
Yeah,
thank you. I was just, I totally agree with being strategic about where you apply generative AI and taking a step back at profitability. But I don't want us to underestimate or undervalue the importance of experimentation right now. This is such a new technology. And so it's like, I know firms have set up committees and they have like these like grand processes of how they're going to evaluate generative AI. But I think it's critical that people start using it now. Don't use sensitive data, use something that's generic enough, but make sure different pockets around the firm are experimenting with it, or a legal department, so that you can understand how to unlock the power of that.
Which is what to add to what you just said. So remember I was saying, when you actually executing, and you need to create a safe space where people can go experiment without sort of, bringing the firm down and exposing any confidential data, because that's what it's like. Try it out, fail fast, but continue to use it and sort of see what are the different ways, what works, what does not work. So experimentation, like you just said, is incredibly important.
If I may, also just look at the places in your practice where you're spending a lot of time, but it's not billable.
Right.
One of the reasons I really like the Zenzio sales associate on the top of my website is that I spend hours every day doing client pitches or entertaining meetings and calls with potential clients, which are very valuable, and that's where the business comes from. But if I can compress that and get more of that data from an AI, that just opens up much more valuable time for me during the day.
Yeah. So now there's a couple of questions, and this one, this kind of, Toby, fits right into your thing about Sally. So the question says, any panelists, are you of any initiatives to develop a uniform set of guidelines, standards, and/or terminology conventions for lawyers' use of AI tools for work product? Example along the lines of Sally. So since Sally's your baby, we can talk about that.
Well, now for the commercial break, we're going to be talking about Sally. So Sally, which is Standards Advancement in the Legal Industry, has been around for a number of years, 8+ years, and it's getting traction where it's being adopted. The Sally standards are metadata. It's data about data. It's like what type of practice is this? What type of document is this? And those sorts of things. The standards that you're suggesting would be practice standards, like you mentioned, guidelines. That would be outside of Sally. I am not aware yet of any of that coming up. I am aware that certain states have spoken in terms of bar ethics guidelines, or what do they call those things? The ethics.
The canons of conduct.
Yeah, the ethics opinions, where they'll say, oh, you have to reveal to the court or whomever if you're using generative AI. But those, to me, that's very, very basic. So to answer the question, I have not seen that yet.
And I think we're going to see that develop more ad hoc as courts, come up with their own rules. You're finding different courts, different judges have different requirements for disclosure. So that's going to sort of, I think, develop as common law until, like ABA or someone takes a handle on it. I also think in terms of terminology and conventions around AI, we in the legal profession might start to merge more with the broader technology, right? Like how these terms are described, because generative AI is coming for every industry, right? And every industry is sort of adapting to it. So there might be more universal standards and universal terminology that the legal profession will start to adopt if they want to interface with the rest of industry on this.
Got it. So there's another question that says, don't most lawyers start with a similar document and change it for the current client and circumstances already? How is Gen AI writing and law team having to review 100% of the words, creating a significant difference in time spent? So Brent, since you've already done this, can you give us your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, you know, with all due respect to everybody who's working in generative AI today, it's not ready to produce a bespoke legal contract that doesn't require human intervention at all. You know, as I say, if I'm doing $100 million purchase and sale agreement, I'm not going to get draft one out of ChatGPT. I can go from the form I used last time, absolutely, and all lawyers do that. We'd be foolish not to. And then, you know, read every word and every page and make the changes that suit the facts of the particular transaction that I'm doing today. There's really not much efficiency today with what might come out of the AI from a generative point of view, because I'm still going to read every word. I've still got to look for hallucinations. I've still got to look for mistakes, which are, you know, shot through with the work product nowadays. And, you know, God help you if you're one of those cats who had ChatGPT print out a brief or write a brief with fake case citations and submit it to the court, because there have been 2 stories along those lines now. But I'm currently not realizing tremendous efficiency from generative AI actually generating work product, in part for the very reason that the gentleman who asked the question cites, which is that we're kind of doing the same thing that we've always been doing, which is taking the output from whether it's from a junior associate or an AI, it's got to be read thoroughly and reviewed anyway.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think what we always recommend is treating this like work product that a junior associate has created. You would never send that on to the client or to the court without reviewing that, you know, yourself and making sure that it has your firm's value, you know, all over it. I do think places, and I agree, Brent, the time savings, like on one document right now, haven't been established by generative AI. I think where it is already starting to have impact is sort of across like a bulk set of documents, or in gathering data and synthesizing data so that you can take the next step. So we're starting to see efficiency gains there, accuracy gains there as well. And then we'll continue to see that as, you know, the technology develops and as we understand better how to apply it to particular use cases.
And make no mistake, I'm an optimist in this regard. I think we're about 5 minutes away from the AI being able to write a contract better than me. And I'm pretty darn good at it, I don't mind telling you. So we're just not quite there yet.
Right.
Where I'm coming from.
Toby?
So I want to tie a couple things together, and part of it was a question that popped up. We should be explicit. When I am talking about the impact of generative AI on the market, I'm talking about what I will call front office use, which is using it in doing client work, as Brent was just suggesting. I have 2 other designations, back office and middle office. Back office would be your marketing team generating an RFP response or writing bios for your website. There's tons of stuff in the back office that you could leverage this for. You will, as a law firm, you will get ROI on that. You will realize the benefits of that because it will lower your cost of producing those things. The middle office is something I designate where timekeepers are doing administrative things, like writing time entries, Brent's favorite thing. So just to clearly delineate between those, most times when people talk in the market, in my opinion, they're talking about the front office. Now, I want to tie something to what Brent had said. What we're starting to see, and I am aware of one, and 𝗏𝗏 pointed out that you got to be thoughtful about, you know, exposing confidential data. But then there was also a comment about, well, aren't you already leveraging your knowledge for other clients from this client? What I see coming are legal specific large language models.
Yeah.
And with the ability to have them behind a firewall. Once that happens, in fact, one of my favorite, and we're going to have a brief commercial again, one of my favorite uses of generative AI, I suggest, is using it to fix your data, because it can go in and say, this matter is patent litigation in biotech patents. And it can go in and say, this matter is M&A in the real estate industry. Your metadata in your systems for both lawyers and clients, and this is a technical term, it sucks. It's really bad, but that's because humans are doing it. The AI is going to get very good at that. So look, the legal specific large language models are going to drive. I liked your 5-minute comment, Brent. This stuff's coming, and I also tie it back to 𝗟𝗏𝗂's comment about learn. And I will say this was very prominent at the Legal Week. 2024 is the year of learning. In 2025 is going to be the year you better have your poop together, because that's when people are really going to be putting this into production. So
that what I'd add is, so when I was at 𝗟𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗃, which was in August, there was already enough talk that it's being used by law firm marketing. I was on one of the panels where we talked about that. So they're using right now for the back office because that's a safe place to do that. That's clearly happening. The next place, which is I think is the middle office, which Toby, what you were saying, and this is as again, that Legal Week, I started to see they're already starting to think about that. It has to be in places like knowledge management. This is the ideal kind of thing to use there, where you're then being able to kind of, and in some ways, I think knowledge management will almost be at the heart of this, where they would then start so that they're able to get the information that's going to be needed, which is within the law firm, to be able to get that much more effectively. So that's middle office. And you're right, I think people are still a little nervous to use it for the front office because of all the legal implications. But would love to get sort of your thoughts. Brent, any ideas as I'm saying that? Because the other two I've seen, and I'm hearing more about those.
It's so impossible to predict sometimes. I mean, the other company I'm involved in is called Idyllic, and honestly, its goal is to replace me. Because I believe that the work that 𝗟𝗏𝗃 is doing and people like her and others in generative AI, it's just going to get so good that it's going to be better at me than most everything I do. And I'm happy to own equity in a company that replaces me at some point in the future. So that's where I am there.
Ravia, any thoughts on that?
Toby, coming back to the concept of the middle office and knowledge management, a couple of things. We've studied that space for a long time, and so much of that being effective today requires associates taking time to structure data, right? To write up a deal summary or to file something properly, and they're not incentivized to do that by the billable hour, right? There's no reason why they should spend time creating a summary instead of working on new client-facing work. And so we've really found, in fact, it reminds me of a story where a law firm on their DMS set up a rule where you had to label the document into a practice area before you could save it. And after a few months, they went to check on it, and I think 50% of the things were labeled Aboriginal law, because that was the first drop down, first item on the drop down. So people hit that and saved it, right? That's what associates do under that time pressure. But being able to structure your data this way, have the generative AI take the first pass on things that are not billable but are essential to leveraging knowledge, I think is a real place that Gen AI can have impact.
So let's now talk about that. So one of the things that we've all sort of said is that law firms are not going to voluntarily adopt generative AI, just given all the impact it's going to have. So then my question for each one of you, and this is, what do you think is going to actually drive them to start doing that? Was it going to be corporate legal departments going to do it first? And then what should they be doing? So I'd love to get your thoughts on, because in some ways, I think once one domino falls, it's more is going to fall, because right now everybody seems to be a little bit of a holding pattern. So Toby, I'll start with you, and then I'll go around and ask each of you. So any thoughts on what's going to start the change?
So quickly on the corporate side, people say, oh, well, this is obvious. It is obvious, because if you think about it, the lower, for a better term, lower level, more commodity level work is usually done in the legal department. That's the obvious place to start deploying this. But legal departments don't have budgets for this kind of stuff, and they don't have the expertise inside. So with some definite exceptions, because I've got friends in legal ops roles, and they basically said, we want to be first, we're going to go hard at this. There will be some, but the great majority of legal departments won't. On the lawyer side, I was on a roundtable with clients and law firms, and the clients were all like, we better see the value of this. And the law firms were like, oh, we're going to go to fixed fees. And I sat, listened to it, and I finally said, clients, you don't have to worry, you will get the benefit of this. And they said, why, how do you say that? And I said, sorry, I don't know if you can hear that. I said, don't worry about it, because partners at law firms are going to go, you know what? You're telling me I could have fewer whiny, overpaid associates if I use this stuff? They're going to use it. So yeah, you might see some of them hesitating, but when they realize it, and I've seen but this is I won't name the firm, it's a global firm. They're really going hard with the behind the firewall, legal specific large language model. New positions are starting to appear. Not explicit yet, but to your points about knowledge management. In fact, this one, there is a relatively senior associate, and they're becoming expert at prompt engineering and doing it across things. And at some point, the firm's going to go, wait a minute, this associate is more valuable, not billing time than than billing time. And I predict, and this again in the paper, different roles are going to appear. And that's what happens when innovation like this happens. But law firms in their current structure, it's just going to be a higher cost. Their cost is going to go up. They're going to have to buy this tech, which is not cheap. They're going to have to hire experts to help them with this tech, which is also not cheap. And their revenue and their margins are going to go down otherwise. So I think firms are going to one day go, wait a minute. And this is why I'm advising them, think strategically. Do this where you're strong or where you want to be strong. Don't randomly choose a place.
Ravia, what are your thoughts? Because I can see you're sort of thinking about what Toby just said, because perfect sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's, and I know Toby's the economist on the call, but there's sort of just basic economic principles. If like buy side changes and labor changes, like the business model is going to have to change, right? And so I think those are sort of inevitable forces. I do think actually, as much as junior associates or people who are doing more lower level work could be at risk of labor displacement first, I actually think we're going to see associates expecting the law firms that they go to be using modern technology, right? No one wants to now review bankers' boxes of documents when you can do it electronically. And I think you'll continue to see associates and junior attorneys and legal professionals to expect sort of state-of-the-art technology being available to them. So I'm interested to see how that impacts the economics, but I would expect that from like the labor side as well as like this expectation to leverage what's available.
Brent, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to see a number of things happening. I think there's a time in the not too distant future, maybe not 5, but perhaps 10 minutes, where at some point it's going to be per se malpractice not to be using an AI in your law practice. It's just going to be negligent not to avail yourself of the amazing level of expertise that you're going to be able to pull, or you're going to be too inefficient, going to take too much time, and the market will decide for you. You're going to see it from the top and the bottom. I think that Simpson Thacher, big firm, big client. They've got a relationship that's based on a lot of things, including the large expenditure of a lot of money. And I see those relationships as probably not changing much, or they're going to be the last sort of at a glacial pace. Down low, I think you're going to see a lot of disruption. I think you're going to see concerns about technology companies harnessing the power of AI and getting hit with the unauthorized practice of law. And we're going to have to talk about what that means in terms of what does it mean to be a lawyer, because we're at a point in history where getting to the lawyer is a bit of a bottleneck because we have a bar license and we're the only ones who can do what we do, and that bottleneck is potentially going to be crushed by the democratization of a lot of the, not just the knowledge, 𝗥𝗶𝘁 I saw your comment there, but yes, even the wisdom of what we lawyers, how we add value to the world. And so I think you're going to see a lot of tech coming up, a lot of solo lawyers coming up. They've replaced all their admin and all their non-billable costs with AI, and they've got perfect access to all the research ever, and they can produce practically anything. And at some point, you have to ask yourself, what role does the human play? But perhaps that's more like 15 or 20 minutes down the road. But I see disruption everywhere from all sides, and I don't think clients are going to want to use us if we're not doing what we do with the help of the most advanced technology we can find.
So I just had a question, and this would be like the sort of the line as we're getting towards the end of our hour. So remember, like where you said large language models, some of them are taking them sort of within their own firewalls. A lot of the top guys can do that, and Brent, this sort of ties a little bit where you said that the top guys are not going to be the big AmLaw, 20, 30 who are already sort of thinking about what they need to do there. So they're bringing it. They're able to do it in-house. They have the money. It's going to be expensive. You get the right people. What happens, the ones who are actually more willing to do it, like the smaller ones, Brent, like, where you're one person law firm, or the smaller ones who actually need it more, who are more likely to adopt it? how do all of, and I want to hear from each, how do you think that they're actually going to be able to get access to it and try to keep it still protected, either within some kind of a legal firewall so they're not releasing any of their clients' information?
I think, if I may, let me jump in. I think there's going to be a huge, underground market in the AI model that was modeled on the particular person. Let me just give you, so the Brent Britton contract drafting AI model is going to get hacked, and is going to get, it's going to be an underground market we got the contract draft. These large language models that are built on particular focused intel are going to be the subject of value exchange at some point in the future, I think.
Ravia, especially given where you're at Thomson Reuters, you guys are like primely positioned to actually become that place that could create that, and everybody could then, because you've got so much knowledge that you guys are sitting on. But just, that's me just saying it, you've got a huge competitive advantage. And
and we think that that's something that we can offer to our clients, right? Is sort of taking what they do really well and bringing sort of the knowledge that TR has, and sort of, because everyone's going to need to differentiate in this space again, right? Everyone will have access to what's publicly available. And then how do you layer on your firm's knowledge, your firm's wisdom, or your client, the knowledge you have of that client, to create sort of a better solution? So I think that's a huge space for exploration and investment.
Got it. Toby, what are your thoughts?
So to give, I'm putting on my economist hat again. I'll give a frame, and I'll borrow some terminology from a friend of mine, Jay. If you look at the market, the top is cream, and that's Brent was mentioned in Simpson Thacher. You got the cream segment, you got the core segment, and then you got the commodity segment. So, and this has been sort of touched on, but this is putting it more explicit. Commodity is the obvious place to start using this. Most large firms really don't do much in the commodity space, but I'll come back to that. So large firms should look at the core, and the core is the biggest spend of clients. It's the run the company stuff. It's not the bet the company, it's the run the company stuff. Now within the core, there's gradation. So probably towards the bottom of the core, if you're saying, where should we start? If you were a big firm, I would look in that space. But even if you are Simpson Thacher and you are a cream firm, every work I've ever seen, and this is from 15 plus years of pricing, even the cream work has commodity level efforts in it. Like discovery. One of my prior firms, I ran the discovery group, and discovery is a very much lower level. But there's discovery in every piece of litigation. So Simpson Thacher might say, oh, we're in the cream space and we can wait on this. Other players, I would say, especially ALSPs, are going to go into that commodity space and start chewing their way up. And this Gen AI is an accelerant for that kind of stuff. So yeah, you might be sitting up in the cream space saying, oh, we're good for now. But if you don't pay attention, those pieces are going to, those below you are going to start chewing in your direction.
It's the nature of disruption. It's happened in many different silos.
Yeah.
It's going to happen in the law as well.
I think one of the positive aspects, though, that we haven't covered is what this means for access to justice. So of course, it's going to be a lot of pressure on profits, but to the point earlier about there being such a bottleneck for access to lawyers, like for things that are commodity, for personal injury or for divorce or custody, the things that really matter in individuals' life, the one or two times they have to interact with, a legal professional, they have trouble getting that access. And the sort of the bandwidth and capacity that generative AI is going to create to help with those things, I think we haven't really started to reckon with that and what that might mean for access to justice. So I'm actually really optimistic about that.
And you raise a slightly tangential issue there, which is there's one thing the AI is not doing anytime soon, and that's appearing in court. Right. That's not going away for a while.
So junior associates can continue to cut their teeth there,
Exactly.
I really like bringing up the access to justice point. In a previous life, I ran that kind of stuff for the Utah State Bar, and there were a lot of discussions around that. And I don't see it as the primary point of this discussion, but that Main Street side, we call it, of law, they might need to be a lot more worried than the big law people are, because there is so much. And Brent, your comment is what triggered my memory. We had a task force, this was 20 plus years ago, on the practice of law. And and there's the unauthorized practice of law, and to enforce the unauthorized, you have to be able to define the practice of law. We couldn't. And I came to the conclusion that there was only one protected practice, and it was criminal defense. Just because, to your point, Brent, they're in court like all the time. But big litigators, they're not in court that often. And there's a whole bunch of work done outside of that. So, but the Main Street lawyers, in fact, in Utah, in cooperation with the courts, we developed an online portal to where, and this was 25 years ago, where clients, also known as humans, could go in and basically fill out a questionnaire, and it would generate their initial pleadings for divorce. I actually had a former father-in-law call me and tell me that, because he was a lawyer who practiced family law at that segment, telling me the Supreme Court needed to, put the bar out of business because it was competing with him and stuff like that. That it has I think, tremendous potential to highly impact in a positive way access to justice, not just for the poor, but for the middle class.
Yeah. So thank you. No, I think so to bring this all together, I think we are all kind of saying that generative AI is going to have a significant impact on the legal industry. And in some ways, and this is what I think, I also read a report that Thomson Reuters goes, that you do not want to go the Pan Am way, which means you can have either you can be proactive and make changes, or you can have it done to you. Right. And I think right now lawyers are kind of waiting around to kind of see where this is going to go. So I think the suggestion almost needs to be each one of them needs to be proactive, because the change is going to happen. There's no way to sort of avoid it. So then it almost makes sense that you proactively decide how you want to adopt it rather than just wait for it to happen to you. But any last thoughts? And I'll start out with Rabia, with you, as we sort of tie this all together, and then we can go around and get everybody to.
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything I would say, it's just now's the time to start figuring it out, right? This isn't one of those opportunities to wait and see what your competitors do and then follow. I think this is the time to experiment, identify sort of the right use cases, and work with your clients. So law firms should be reaching out to their clients to talk about how to use generative AI and be an advisor in that space as well. I think that's a huge opportunity. So my closing thoughts are just get your hands dirty, be in the space.
Toby?
I should have gone first because I would say the same thing. I would say, to her point, get your hands dirty, start playing with it right now, because you do want to figure this out. You do want to figure out what kind of support you need. The tech is going to be expensive enough, but you're going to say, let's do this use case, this use case, this use case. That's where it'll get even more expensive, because you're going to need the right people. But start learning now. And the second point, which is reiterating something I said before, choose wisely. When it comes to the front office, choose very carefully about where you lean in on this, because you will generate a competitive advantage. And so you should know up front that that's the one you wanted. Got it.
Brent?
Yeah, I've been, my hat is off to everyone who's doing this. I've been studying AI or practicing it for most of my life, and I'm as a former engineer, and I'm still very baffled and confused at all the options and all the opportunities and all the things that are going on right now. And it's really difficult, and I need a concierge who knows what's going on to just kind of navigate me through the available tools. I would say this as a word of advice: this is going to happen way faster than you think. Toby laid out a 2-year plan for 24 is going to be the year for sort of this, and 25 is going to be when it really hits the ground. I mean, yeah, maybe, but it might be, next month. I mean, it's going to accelerate. It's going to go asymptotic, and it's going to be more rapid than we think. And I think just in general, what we're discussing here today is a macrocosmic look at a very much bigger question, which is how does society and civilization and capitalism operate when we have machines that do many things that only humans could do better, stronger, faster than us. And we got to figure out what that means in terms of labor and everything. So with that,
so we're living in an exciting time. There's going to be lots of change. And I think the one thing we should not forget it's at the end of the day, it's about people. You can have the best technology. It's about how do you bring people along on the journey. And by itself, the legal profession, lawyers tend to be, more on the conservative side. So it's actually incredibly important that everybody kind of make sure that they bring the people along, because that's the one thing you find that the most resistant to change is because people are like, this is how we've done it. We don't want to make a change. And if you bring them along, then they feel less nervous. You have to tell them it's not taking away your job. It's going to make your job different. But I think it's very, very critical not to forget on that people aspect. But anything you guys want to add from that perspective? Because that's, yes.
I hope our future AI overlords can hear you when you suggest that they should bring people along. I'd be happy to be a pet for the AI in the future.
Toby?
I would just say that, and I've heard this many times and I agree with it, AI is not going to replace people. People who use AI are going to displace people who don't use AI.
Yep. Rabia?
Yeah, I mean, we firmly at TR believe within the next 2 to 3 years, every lawyer will have an AI assistant. Like, we just think it's going to be the way that work gets done going forward. So obviously getting people on board with that seems essential, but I think it's inevitable. It's a question of when.
This reminds me of a joke. The law firm of the future consists of a computer with running AI, a German Shepherd, and a lawyer. And the computer's job and the AI's job is to practice law, and the German Shepherd's job is to bite the lawyer if she tries to touch the computer.
That's it. So with that, we would like to end this discussion. So, but thank you all. It was really great chatting with you. Really appreciate it. And thank you to our audience who has been very kind and given us questions and comments. So we really appreciate that too. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for joining our Digital Dialogue. Be sure to join our next Digital Dialogue on the first and third Tuesdays of every month.